Good evening, everyone. Jonah DePasquale and Gunnar Soros. This is Bike Chat 101. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is great to have everybody out there. If you are watching this on replay, thank you so much. Below or again in one of those squares, conveniently enough, hailing out of Rochester, Minnesota, is Gunnar Soros. Gunnar Soros is a self-employed graphic artist, cyclist, and craft beer lover. Also host of Craft Beer Chat Tuesdays at 9:01 p.m. I'd also like to take a few minutes to welcome Dave Canning. Dave Canning is joining us first and foremost on the interweb and live stream. But let's get to it. Gunnar, got any quick words before we roll things over to Mr. Graham?
Not really. I'm just excited to see what he has to say. I took a look at his website and he's got some really nice bikes. The one that really stuck out for me was the Fat Bike cargo bike that's on there. Really nice looking machine, but they all look nice. So I'll just let you guys go ahead with that.
Awesome. So folks, with us is Joe Graham of Graham Cycles. Good friend of mine. We had the pleasure of again just sort of haphazardly running into each other, not literally. Some of the local trails, sort of kind of a Cinderella story. One thing led to another. Kind of had a few intermittent conversations about, hey, what are you doing with your life? I'm an engineer. I'm doing this and doing that. Next thing you know, he's like, hey, I'm going to start building bikes. And, obviously the rest is history. So with that, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're super busy. You got a lot going on. Folks, Joe Graham of Graham Cycles. Joe, just, give us a little bit of update and a little bit of history of where you're at and what's going on with Graham Cycles today.
Awesome. Yeah. As Jonah said, we met back in Rochester. Since then, I've moved to a couple of places. I lived in Syracuse for a while, and I'm now out in New Hampshire. I kind of like Jonah was saying, it was a little bit of a Cinderella thing. I had a job, working, kind of doing that, and started building bikes as a hobby. Really fell in love with it, and happened to be at a point in my life where I could run with it a little bit. And so I left my job 4 years ago. How many years ago, Dave? You might.
I think it's been 4, man.
I think it's been 4. Yeah, left. It feels like a long time since I've sat at a desk and done that kind of work. So I left my job and just kind of continued to build. Started to build for friends, family. Started to get on the internet and try to create a little bit of some awareness, I guess, of what I'm doing. And now we're a couple years into Graham Cycles being a fully legitimate LLC business, real professional frame builder.
Nice.
And really loving it, getting to work with a lot of amazing, other amazing companies as well, Industry 9, Stands, Envy. It really has been an adventure for me when, I reach out to some of these companies and they're like, oh yeah, like we've heard of you, like we checked out your stuff, like sweet trust fork. It's like, oh my gosh, it's just kind of cool. The cycling world, while it's big, it's also, tight knit, and there's a lot of people that are out there just checking out different stuff online. And so, I would think, Joe Graham, little bike builder in, Southern New Hampshire, who's going to know about him? And then, you're talking to a guy down in Asheville, North Carolina, worked at 99. It's like, oh yeah, we've seen your website. We've seen some of your stuff, It was really cool, really been a really fun adventure for me.
Nice. Yeah, that's super exciting. And now with getting into the next step of segueing into Dave, who's one of your happy customers. I know that initially when you kind of started out, I guess this was sort of that fat bike boom. I don't necessarily obviously if people look at your website, grahamcycles.com, there's a number of different bikes that you make. But again, just in terms of the friends that I ride here with locally and the folks that you build with, it seems to be that the fat bike is really your go-to medium, I guess is my question and my point.
Yeah. I think what kind of ended up happening is that right about the time that I was getting into building, there were really like 2 fat bikes. It was like the Pugsley and the Muckluck, and that was it. And so I was getting into the custom scene, and guys were saying, hey, I want a fat bike, but there's very few options. I want something custom. I want something from you. What can you do? And, you know, I got into fat biking. I guess it's hard to say who got into fat biking early on. You know, the very first year that Sterling sold the Pugsley as a complete bike, I got a Pugsley. I was working at a shop in northern Michigan. We were hooked up, you know, with the rep in Minnesota. And like, you know, we were like, there was like 3 guys in the shop, and we were the only guys in town that had fat bikes, you know, that very first winter. And so, you know, around the time that I had started building, you know, like the fat bike was one of my favorite bikes. And I had upgraded to a Moonlander. And, you know, but I, as a builder and as a thinker, you know, there were things that I started to see that I was like, oh, like I'd like to do this a little differently. And no one's making it yet. You know, there's just a couple bikes out.
Right.
And so I
Nice.
made a couple fat bikes, and a few of the people that wanted bikes from me early on wanted fat bikes because it was something they didn't already have in the stable, and they couldn't really get exactly what they wanted. And so I guess the long answer I was trying to get around to is that I think because of that, because people have seen the fat bikes that I've done, they think of me as like, oh, like, you know, Graham Cycles does fat bikes, and that leads to more people coming and asking for that product.
Nice.
In reality, I've done gravel bikes, touring bikes, cargo bikes, regular 29ers, commuter bikes. You know, like I've done a wide variety of things, but I think the fat bikes stand out, and I've certainly done the majority of my bikes have been fat bikes. So I end up getting kind of known as that. Yeah.
But
Nice.
again, it's not necessarily a corner that you're going to paint yourself into. To Gunner's point, the cargo bike you did was phenomenal. I saw you've done a cyclocross bike. I've seen you've done like a dirt jumping bike, some single speed. So no, absolutely. I think for folks out there watching, again, even if you're watching this on replay, you know, Graham Cycles isn't necessarily all about fat bikes. I mean, again, the whole theory of being, you know, able to do custom builds. It's like, look, what do you want? You know, is that kind of a safe assessment as far as where you're going with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, when I was getting started, one of my goals was to try to do a large variety of bikes just to have the experience and know, you know, what do I like to do? What do I not like to do? What do I do well?
Gotcha.
I think that in the next couple of years, you know, you'll see Graham Cycles transition to just doing a few styles of bikes really well.
Right.
I mean, really, you know, one of my favorite bikes that I've built, and one that I've built for several people, and everyone who has one is like, yeah, this is like the best all around, you know, road bike I have is a bike I call the Microgram, and it's a disc brake road bike that has clearance for up to 40C tires, so you can use it for gravel, you can use it for cross. And I actually like to set it up tubeless, you know, run some stance wheels, go tubeless, get a wider range 2x10 drivetrain. And it's an awesome bike. It's like, you know, for me living out, you know, where I live, there's a ton of really good gravel. And every time I ride the bike, I'm like, this bike is excellent. More people should have a bike like this. The geometry, I really don't try to steer it towards being a really race-oriented, aggressive geometry. It's a little more of a, you know, an all-day kind of geometry, a long kind of day geometry. And you know, the people I've done it for, just like, yeah, like this is the most comfortable bike I have. I'm so happy to go out and ride this bike for 2 hours, 4 hours, 100 miles, you know, whatever it may be.
Great.
So I really want to do more of that. You know, obviously I want to continue to do the work with the fat bikes because I'm loving the fat bikes. And you know, currently I'm working on like a dedicated bike packing bike. And, you know, I'm hoping in the next couple of years, those will kind of be the realms I'll work in. And I'll be known for doing sort of those 3 bikes, still custom to whatever degree people want. But, you know, people won't necessarily think like, oh, Graham Cycles, like I'm coming to them for a race road bike. You know, like that's not something that I really build. You know?
Right.
Awesome. Nice. Very, very cool. Now, bike packing, I've ironically, I've been seeing a significant amount of that come my way through my social feeds. Like Blackburn is big into pushing that culture. You know, and they've got just, I would say, some just freaking maniacs that are like, you know, they're doing it. You know, they're just taking the bike and going. And Dave, I could probably see you doing that. You know, you're probably one one cocktail away from going nomadic. You probably just get all the stealth packs and go and disappear. But anyway, I don't want to make any assumptions. But
Yeah, I don't know that I've got the relationship capital in order to throw down another fat kilogram build right now. The stable's looking pretty good, but I'll check in here a couple things. So I've got a really early Joe Graham Telegram, which is a bike that I ride to work. I'm lucky enough to live right along the Erie Canal, and my office is not all that far off the Erie Canal. And I've got this sweet commuter bike that you can check out on Joe's website. It's all cool. It's got a welded up rack on it, and dude, the rack is awesome. Like if I need to take my kids somewhere, like they sit on that rack. I got a set of handlebars that clamps onto the seat post like a tandem would. And even my wife sometimes, like she'll hop up there and sit on it. Man, that thing is rock solid. Down the path we go. So I'm digging that, and I love my Graham commuter bike, but I gotta say that where my heart really is with the custom Graham fatness, and I know that, like what Jonah was saying at the beginning there, like fat bikes and obviously Joe could do, you could do whatever, man, and but that fat bike, I'm double deep in the Graham fat bikes now. Like Joe built me a fatty a few years ago, and that was such an awesome experience, and I learned a lot from exactly like what I wanted from a fat bike. And then maybe this past March out in Moab, I had some new ideas about another direction that I want to make some changes here and there, because when I bought the first one, or I should say when Joe and I sat down and figured out all the details for my first fat bike, like I didn't get it yet. I thought that I'm gonna get this fat bike so that I can make this kind of like lame group ride that I lead a little bit more interesting, and I can get out in the winter, and like I'm going to try this fat bike thing, but it's just kind of a like clown bike, and I do what I do on my like regular suspension bike. And then I got this bike and I rode it like 3 times. And then I rode my other bike once, and I rode like literally off an embankment and like tumbled into a ditch. And I thought to myself, man, like my other bikes don't brake like this bike does. And I can't corner like they do, and the rest is kind of history for me. Like I am a 365 days a year on the fat, in the trails, here local. When I travel, like I put my fat bike on the roof of my truck and drove to Moab, Utah this past year to ride it out there. And so anyway, like I think it was time to take it to the next level, and slack that head tube out a couple more degrees and stiffen the bike up so that you could hit it with a sledgehammer and it wouldn't flex. And we made some cool changes to the geometry, and now I'm sold. Like it's a trail slayer, and I'm out there trail slaying on that fat bike. It's awesome. I love you, man. I love my fat bike.
Now it was funny, and just a little segue in between that is that basically you went from occasionally riding your 26er to like literally dismantling it, and I actually have the cranks from that bike on my bike, so I guess it worked out for the good there. So, but no fat bike yet in my quiver, but I can tell you though that just ironically, the folks in our group, the faster pace group that we ride in, I mean they certainly don't have any issues. And by the way, Joe, I do want to back up at a comment you said earlier, the Moonlander. That was probably one of the worst beat downs I've ever been handed to by somebody.
Oh man, I remember that night.
it was Joe, and again, just to really bridge this story. It was Joe brushing it off, saying, "Man, I really should have brought my Cannondale, hardtail 29er," and I'm going, for crying out loud, dude, my ass is already blistering from trying to keep up with you.
Dude, let me jump in here for a second, Jonah D. Like, I remember this day. Like, this was a Monday night. We always have this, like, Monday night ride, and I was at the parking lot. I had never met Joe Graham before, and I'm like, I get to the parking lot, and there's just, like, Jonah and one other fast guy, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Nothing's going to hold us back. We're going to slay tonight. And then this dude on this clown bike shows up, and he rolls into the parking lot, and I'm like, oh, no. Like, our baller ride just turned into Donkey Fest. And then, like, 45 minutes later, I'm, like, crawling on the ground, begging, mercy, slow down on the clown bike. I can't do it. And dude, at that point, I'm like, wow, man. Like, either this dude is a superstar or that ain't a clown bike. And that was an eye opener for me. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I was and the terrain that we were riding was pretty robust.
It was robust. So it was, it was steep. I mean,
I was stoked because I'd never been over there. Like, we got through, like, we went around the bay and we got out to whatever. What is the bar there? The bar that we
Annabelle.
Yeah, and I was thinking, oh, we'll go. We'll finish the loop and we'll go back. And you guys are like, you want to go up to East Bay? I'm like, where is that? Like, where are we going? I'm all excited. We're going to this new place. I've never been. And we go out there and it's like gnarlier, steeper, rootier, but it was good. I was like, I brought the fat bike because, like, I remember when I lived there, like, I'd ride with different groups of people, and a lot of them were like really social, casual rides. So I was like, oh, like, I don't know these guys, but I'll bring the fat bike because I'll hedge my bets. I'll definitely get a good workout if I ride the fat bike. And then I come out, you got I got to throw down the fat bike. Like, I just came with the fat bike to throw down now. Like,
there were no issues there. So that was clearly it was the bike. That's for sure.
I'm still getting over the emotional scars from that night.
Yes.
I got raped by a clown.
Yeah.
Nice. It's been interesting, and now I've got a couple questions, and I don't know, Gunnar, if you do as well, but I've also been seeing a big trend with a lot of folks moving to and I'll say e-bikes and things like that. I mean, I read a couple articles about that today, where they're saying the industry is citing I believe a 6% growth rate on that segment of e-bikes. Now, again, I don't necessarily know if that's even ever something that has crossed your mind, but I guess I want to kind of chime in on two parts of it. I mean, is that or would that be something you'd be considering? And I guess what's your take on this whole e-bike thing? And I guess the big reason why I say that is when there were commuter bikes and random bikes, I didn't really pay much mind to them. But if a good number of the major big box manufacturers have brought like e dual suspension bikes, and even now you see the e fat bikes. I mean, what's your take on that?
Okay, so I'll answer in two parts. Like, first I'll say just what I think about the e-bikes, and then I could speak specifically to what may happen with Graham Cycles and e-bikes. Some people are like e-bike haters. They're like, oh, like e-bikes aren't biking, and they're fat guys out on the trail going fast and this and that. Like, I personally have no issue with e-bikes. I think that, especially for the urban realm, I would rather see people riding e-bikes than driving cars. It'd be amazing if you sit outside and you watch traffic anywhere nowadays. You see tons of people going by. There's one person in the car. They're driving a 6,000-pound vehicle, burning on fossil fuels. They could be on e-bikes. Like, not only could you move more people through congested areas, but it would be better for the planet. So I'm all about e-bikes because it gets people that don't want to pedal riding. In Europe, they're way ahead of us in the e-bike scene, both for the commuters and the mountain bikers. And in terms of people I've talked to from Europe, they say, oh yeah, like the guys riding e-bikes are guys that they don't really have the time to pedal like they used to. And, like when you're not in as good a shape, like biking is not as fun. It's a little bit more of a struggle. So This is something that's helping those guys that don't have the time to put in the miles anymore to still ride. Do I want to get blown away by a guy riding on an e-bike? No. But is it going to ruin my day? Absolutely not. Like, you just have it. Would you get mad when someone passes you on a motorcycle? Like, no, that happens. Yeah, I'm all for it in a variety of realms. And then to speak specifically to, like, with Graham Cycles, the one application that I've really thought about the e-bike for, like seriously considered it, was the Chubby Pony. Was that, that cargo fat bike. And really the idea was inspired by, I did a shop visit. I don't remember the name of the shop. I wish I did. It was a really cool shop in the Adirondacks. And the owner was telling me a story about a Moonlander that he built up with, a pedal assist front hub, for a woman that liked to ride her bike with her dogs. And, she was older and she needed a bike that was really stable and can ride on these sandy trails. And he's like, great, fat bike, but there's no way you're pedaling it. I'm going to, I'll put this pedal assist, kind of set up on it so that you can get it up the hills and stuff. And I've thought about that for the Chubby Pony, because it's this cargo bike that, you could very easily load it up and go, oh gosh, like, this is a lot to pedal.
Right.
I live maybe 16 miles out of town. And it's there's times where I go, wow, like if this bike had a pedal assist, or e-bike, or had some sort of power to it, that I might use it more.
Right.
Just because right now, like, to go to town and back, like, it's a big, it's a time commitment. And if I had a little boost and could still be pedaling, but could do it more efficiently, that would be nice. That would open it up for even more usage.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at on e-bikes. I think we're going to start seeing more of it here as it trickles over from Europe. But I think if we were sitting in Europe right now, we probably all know guys that ride e-bikes regularly,
Right.
What
But
about
we still laugh about them behind their backs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there's definitely valid conversations both ways on that. I think you're right. I mean, I've always been of that mentality with with the snow sports industry, for example, like, shape skis and progressive side cut snowboards, and I think that if nothing else, if it does, number one, the first thing, really opens up, I don't want to say the floodgates, but if it certainly shortens that point of entry barrier to the industry, I think the better. With commuters, absolutely. I was talking recently with the mechanic from Yellow House Bicycles, and they have an electric cargo, not really, well, I don't really say cargo bike, but that same era. And whenever they do bike events or anything like that, it's amazing. They got like a little trailer they kind of retrofitted to carry their gear and their tools, and I mean, people love that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a great conversation, and not for nothing. I mean, I think that the one particular, it was a Stormer, by the way. That was the name of the bike. It's called a Stormer. He's like, dude, the thing does like 28 miles an hour. I mean, you could cover, think about that. I mean, you could cover some serious distance. So to your point is that, okay, maybe you're not necessarily literally pedaling 28 miles, but I think to your point, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I mean, I really agree with what you're saying. I mean, it is a person not in a car. They're on a bicycle. I mean, again, they're not burning fossil fuel. So, I mean, this has been an interesting conversation, because I definitely think it's helped me sort of sway the conversation the other way. I mean, I'm of the purest mode where I'm out there breaking my ass on the trails. I agree. I don't want some boner passing me on a dual suspension electric bike. But you know what? At the end of the day, they're not on the couch. They're on the trails, and I guess whatever works for them. So that's an interesting topic. I think we will certainly see it. And I think
you know what? I'll lead by saying, people are going to be grumpy, right? And haters are going to hate. But at the end of the day, people on the trail is people on the trail, and we want more of that. And when you look at, cycling, like cycling historically has just been too many rich white guys. And we need to be breaking down barriers to people being in cycling, not like doing everything we can in order to defend those barriers, right? And if getting some people who aren't as fit into cycling, I'm all for it. So like I say that, cycling has been a small group for too long, and it ought to be a big group. Now, there's a land management problem angle where, if an e-bike is a motorcycle, it becomes like a land access problem. But I think that we can manage that. And as far as I'm concerned, like I'm completely with you guys. E-bikes is bikes. They ain't cars, right? And anything we can do to get people to quit, sitting on the couch, or quit, burning oil in their cars, man, like that is a good thing. So, down on the hating.
Well, and I think the big thing, though, even amongst ourselves as, enthusiasts, entrepreneurs, whatever, I mean, these are some very valid conversations and points that we're making. And I would almost challenge every rep out there when they're knocking on these IBD doors to distribute these bikes. And Joe, you made a great point about that. Oh, well, in Europe, they're blowing up. I mean, I will say to you, in many of the other things that are going on out there versus Europe, I mean, we are just so far behind. It's not even funny. But I think the reality of it is with getting people to understand that. And I think, Dave, you bring up a great point about, how, the conversation of, how do, municipalities and parks and, those types of things. I mean, how do they start to, kind of homogenize and introduce the e-bike culture? Because it's going to happen. I mean, I think, Joe, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is going to happen. And I mean, look at segways, for crying out loud. Remember how stupid we thought those things were? I mean, I was in San Francisco, this summer, and I was like blown away at how many Segway tours of people on Segways, taking, tours of the city. I mean, that's not exactly the same thing, but, I mean, just Dave, just as with the Monday night ride or any other ride, I mean, there will be groups of people getting together on e-bikes to ride bikes. And Dave, to your point, I mean, does that not make them cyclists just because they're on e-bikes? So kind of.
Now here's the question: what if there was let's say we were just telling a story about showing up to a group ride. What would you do if you got a group ride and a guy shows up on an e-bike? Like, are you just gonna ride and be like, yeah, like he can ride? Like, part of me thinks like, oh, I'd be like, okay, like man versus the machine. Like I'm gonna try to slay this guy even though he's on an e-bike. But like, what happens? There's gonna be a whole new form of etiquette that's gonna have to form. Because can e-bikes ride with regular bikes? Can they, like you're saying, can they ride the same trails? Like, how will that shake down?
I'll take that one, man. I think the etiquette it's already there, right? Like, there's already like so many different kind of rides. Like our Monday night ride that we ride, like we slay, but we don't ever drop anybody, right? And there are rides that you go on that are like drop rides, and it's all about like dropping people or not being dropped. And like rides like that, yeah, like the e-bike thing is it's gonna twist that culture. But when you just got dudes being dudes and like going out, like when we go out on our rides, like we ride in order to beat up the last guy in the group, but not so bad that he's not smiling and having a good time. And you know what? If there's an e-bike in that mix, well, dude, if he's going faster than everybody else, he's going to have to wait for the slowest guy. And if he's the slowest guy, then I'm going to wait for him and I ain't going to worry about it. So from that perspective, it ain't going to affect me at all. Now, is there some like I'm fitter than you dorkweed shop ride out there that this is going to affect? Amen. Yeah, it sure is. But not going to affect my world.
Yeah, no, I think that's but again, I think this is one of those, I think, incredibly raw conversations between, the masses and the purists, I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think to Joe's point, I think if you brought up e-bikes and just a random conversation with just like, the average Joe, I think they'd be like, oh, cool, neat idea. But I think to your point about all of us in this form right now, I mean, we had to we had to earn that fitness the hard way by throwing the leg over the old saddle and humping and pumping. And you know there's part of me that's dying on the vine. I have to say that because I mean, you know me. I mean, I just have recently had two kids, and I've been getting murdered with eating Jack's food and all this other crap. So it's been I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's been a challenge to not only get back on the bike, but just to make that commitment. And I think that, to Joe's point, about the person who, I guess loses that like fitness edge. I think it would be interesting to get out on a dual suspension e-bike and put it through the motions to see exactly like, what the hits were, what the misses were, what I'm gaining, what I'm losing. And I would have to say, Dave, with your point, probably not much. I would have to say, you know what? After I got done riding my bike, he'd be like, I rode my bike. Not like, hey man, I've got the e-bike buzz, whatever.
Dude, I tell you what, like you overcook a corner, you're still going to eat shit, and at the end of the day, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tommy Crowder, he's one of our good friends tuning in. Yeah, Tommy was talking about e-bike, and I see Gunnar, you had answered him back. Tommy, we were talking about e-bikes, and the question that I'd asked Joe earlier, what his thoughts were about the e-bikes, and whether Graham Cycles was going to go in that direction. But the e-bikes have been around actually a fairly long time. I think that now that a good majority of the big box manufacturers, i.e. the Treks, the Specialized, the Fuji, the Felt, etc., are producing these like ready, off the shelf models available for consumers. First of all, they're much more readily available, and I think the prices comes drastically down as well as the technology. But they're primarily targeted at commuters, like Joe was saying earlier. But we were just talking about how they're starting to infiltrate into the mountain bike world. And lastly, as I'm not going to take up any more time here, is I'm going to pose this to everybody here. What would you do if you rolled up to the line for like a gravel race or a mountain bike race and somebody was in the lineup on an e-bike? Like, how would that work? Right?
Right.
Well, I ain't got time for racing to start with.
Well, and I think there's so much regulation in organized bike racing that obviously it's going to keep out of that. But like a lot of these grassroots gravel events, I don't know if they would be shunned, so to speak, but there might definitely be, because I mean, there's guys that are pretty much pros showing up to these free gravel events and blowing everybody's doors off. And so they'll probably not take too kindly to an e-bike showing up to toe the line. But that being said, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with having a separate category. I mean, they do that with all kinds of, I mean, most of the gravel events have a fat bike category, and then they have their, open category, and then women. And so there's nothing wrong with putting a e-bike category. And hey, if you want to go out and try to do 30 miles an hour on an e-bike, go have at it and see if you can hold that line in the corner and make it out. That's just fine.
There would be, I guess if I saw it, I would be, and I just might be thinking about my safety, because I would say, okay,
right.
The person's not on a regular bike, which, could be a very clear indication that they don't ride a whole lot. Because if they rode a whole lot, they wouldn't be riding an e-bike necessarily. And now you've got someone who has something with a lot of power that may, I may be ahead of them. They may come into that corner at 30 and cook it into me and take me off, off the road.
Right.
So I might see it.
Yeah, there's that issue. Yeah, for sure. Well, and then on the other side of it too, though, is that, like we were saying, how it opens it up for beginners. It also kind of opens it up to people that I don't know how else to say it, handicapped. Maybe they're missing a limb or they're missing a leg or something, and you see riders with one leg and stuff all the time on like the news or on YouTube and stuff. And I mean, they got to work twice as hard just to go as fast as a regular person. So then here's something that kind of opens it back up to them, or, somebody that loses a limb and they're like, I'll never be able to ride with my friends again, but here's a way that I can.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
No, so I'll share one more story about e-bikes. E-bikes have been, you were talking about the big manufacturers just starting to get into it. When was the last time I was working at a bike shop? 6 or 7 years ago. I was selling giant e-bikes to people. Yep. And one day we had a couple come in, husband, very avid rider, one of these guys where he's retired and now he has too much time to ride. So he's way too fast for a dude that's in his like late 50s. And his wife, they like to go riding together. They had tried the tandem thing and she's like, no way, I'm not getting on the tandem with him. Like, it doesn't work for me. And so, the idea they had and a really good idea was, we'll put her on an e-bike, and then she can keep up. And so, we went out, we got on the lot on it, we got her comfortable on it. She zipped around it, loved it. And, they would come back to the shop fairly regularly for service and just be glowing about, this thing works so great. Now we can go out and we can ride together. He can get his miles in. I don't have to bust my, butt and feel guilty that I'm not fast enough to ride with him. So that was an extremely positive experience that I had selling them. But I was like, yeah, from the very beginning, I was like, this is a good thing,
Yeah. Definitely.
You know what else is good? Like slack head tubes and short stems on fat bikes. That's also good. And like I'm all about talking about like culture and e-bikes and all that, but I'm also all about slack head tube angles and short stems and stiff rear ends, and that's some good stuff too.
Right. Well, so let's talk about geometry. I have. My time on a fat bike has been very limited to a buddy of mine had a spare Specialized, I think it was, whatever their fat bike is. Nice bike, handled well, rode a bunch of times in the winter and it was nice. But now I see that there's more racy fat bikes, and then there's, I don't know, touring fat bikes, and there's different bikes in different categories. And is it just geometry, or what is the difference?
I think if you look at some of the early fat bikes that came out, they were kind of using what was even at that time antiquated mountain bike geometry. Like the Pugsley was almost like kind of almost old XC mountain bike geometry. And what you've seen happen now with bikes like like the Fat Boy, so like some of the bikes that I've been doing, what is my one that, the new Surly Wednesday, I believe, is they've gone to like a trail bike geometry, like regular mountain bike geometry you'd see on everything else, where you've got shorter stays, you've got, 69, 68, 60, 70 degree head tube angle. You've got suspension corrected front end. So your whole front end's a little bit taller. You're sitting more upright. And I think that's just, it's been partially an evolution of how people are riding their fat bikes, like that old school mountain bike geometry sort of made sense when you were just kind of going and plodding around in the snow. But as soon as guys started saying, hey, I want to rip on this thing all year round, it wasn't a geometry for riding aggressively. And I don't see a whole lot of the bikes coming out, with the geometry of the Pugsley anymore, with that kind of old school geometry. They're almost all, it seems like, variations of a trail kind of geometry now.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the other thing though too is what I noticed with a good number of the folks here in Upstate, getting on the Surly bandwagon, the fork designs, the suspension, the advent of the suspension designs, I think really was the game changer. In fact, there's a gentleman in Mendon Cyclesmiths that was kind of really, I would say, kind of pioneering a lot of that back in the day. I mean, I can recall walking into a shop and seeing, an actual lefty fork laced into, a fat bike wheel, and I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that. And he's just like, well, it makes no sense to have a rigid fork. And he's like, you know what? He goes, I just figured, the machining and the design to build something that makes sense, into a functional, application. Now, I mean, again, makes a lot of sense. And getting to your point, when they started adding forks to them, I know that definitely had a lot to do with that trail design. But I do actually want to kind of switch gears a little bit with the trusset fork. How is that in effect to the geometry? You say trail geometry, because like I know Dave's first bike had a trusset fork, and a couple of the guys we ride with that you built bikes for had that same fork. Does that change that same geometry? Or are you able to still build the bike that way with that slack trail geometry, or does that the design of that fork change it?
Yeah, I mean, we could use Dave's bike as an example. So, being a custom fork, it could be either way. You could build one that was non-suspension corrected and have a really low front end and have a steep head tube angle if you wanted. You could have it short and have a slack head tube angle. In the case of Dave's bike, because we know, for the summer months he's going to run the Bluto, and the winter months he's going to run the truss fork. It's actually designed to be a suspension corrected fork, but we actually got even a little bit more complex than that, because if you think about the tire that you ride in the summertime, you ride a 4-inch tire. So you got your Bluto fork, you got your 4-inch tire. In the wintertime, you're probably going to put on the fattest tire you can. You want to put on your 5-inch, your Bud or your Dilly 5, or what's the new one? The new V Snowshoe XXL. It's like a 5.05. That larger tire is a larger diameter. And so what we did with Dave's bike was we actually compensated for that larger diameter wheel in the fork length. And so when he switches between his summer and his winter setup, his Bluto with a 4-inch tire and his truss fork with a 5-inch tire, his suspension actually, or his geometry remains neutral. It doesn't actually, jack his front end way up and give him a really slack head tube angle when he puts the large wheel in.
Gotcha. Okay.
I've done kind of one of the cool things about the truss forks that I do is that I've done them to match a variety of different bikes, and I've also done them to change a variety of bikes. So, for example, I've had customers that have a Pugsley. They say, hey, I love my Pugsley. I want a truss fork. I kind of want to try to get a little bit more towards this trail geometry. I want to get, a little slacker head tube angle. And so, I've made a truss fork that's a little bit longer than what their stock Pugsley fork was to raise the front end of that bike a little bit. There's only so much you can do before you make compromises in other places. But you could definitely tweak it and improve things a little bit. Even working with the trail dimension of the fork and creating a fork that has more offset. There's a whole bunch of little things that can be done to really, fine tune the ride and take a bike that, maybe a bike that's not quite right and make it right.
Yeah, awesome.
Let me throw a couple of fork thoughts out there. First, let me say that I absolutely love the truss fork with the fat bike. And, for me, if you're running a fat bike, you're either running a Bluto or you're running a truss fork. Like, I don't have time for the regular forks. And one of the reasons that is because, one thing that people don't recognize is just how much more traction fat bikes have. And when you go and you grab a big fistful of front brake on a fat bike, Like you will make the biggest, gnarliest fork bend. And one of the things that those truss forks do is that they resist that, diving fork flex. And when you're out there on like a regular straight blade rigid fork, man, like that is there all the time and you're feeling it. And that's one awesome thing about the truss fork that you don't have to worry about. And now to like switch gears a little bit, to kind of talk about, to one of the things that Jonah was saying earlier, how like the front suspension and the Bluto is kind of a game changer in the summer. Like I rode my first Graham fat bike, for, I don't know, I remember how long it was before I got the Bluto for it, but like I feel like I remember getting the bike kind of like in the winter maybe, and I rode it through the winter, and then I rode a whole summer, and then I rode a little bit more time, and then I got the Bluto. And so I had ridden this bike for a long time, and then I got a Bluto. And within like a single digit number of weeks of getting the Bluto, like maybe only like 2 or 3 weeks, I had decimated my rear wheel because I had taken, the slaying to just the next level by simply adding that front geometry. And I didn't really notice that things were changing, but I was riding so much harder, I should say, that the rear wheel just like got ham-fisted, and I blew that wheel up just by virtue of the fact that the suspension fork on the front was able to let me like push it just that much harder that that it did that rim in.
Wow. Awesome.
Wow, good stuff, man. What's up? Quick, Joe. Quick question for you. How small of a bike do you build? Like, for example, I know you're dealing with people with short inseams, those kinds of things. Like, what's the smallest build you've done as far as bike size?
Man, there's a couple guys I've done bikes for who have been 5'4", 5'5", and want to ride a 29er. Right. And there's just not a lot out there in that size in the 29-inch wheels. Because you're talking about someone who needs a standover height of, probably close to 26 inches, but a 29er wheel itself is smaller than that. And what you end up with is, in my opinion, a bike that looks kind of cool. It's almost like this thin, this thin little frame in between these two massive wheels. I've done a couple for riders that size. I don't think I've done anything for anyone smaller than that. I've had a few people ask me about bikes for their kids, and so
dude, my kid regularly lobbies for a Graham fat bike.
You got, Christmas is coming. Yeah, and then really, actually, the other end of the spectrum, I did a bike last year for a gentleman who is 6'8". Wow. And actually wanted a cruiser. Like, have you guys ever seen the Electra bikes, the Townie? It's got that pedal forward kind of thing. This guy saw one of those, went around, rode it, was like, this is awesome, but like, it's like a kid's bike. I need a man's bike, And his son knew me. I used to work with his son and kind of like connected him to me, and and he was like, I want a bike that rides like this, but I'm 6'8". I'm huge, and so this thing was like maxed out, like as big as my jig could go, and came out really cool. So that's probably the largest bike that I've done.
Nice, that's awesome. And you are you spilling the beans? Are you alluding to the fact that you're making kids bikes? Is Jack's next bike coming from you? Is that what you're hinting to me? Is that what you're saying? You got two customers in the queue.
What I really need to find is I need to find like someone who maybe has like a few kids coming, because obviously it's an investment to get a custom bike, but you look at the bikes that are available for kids and they're heavier than the bikes that we're riding. You know what I mean? There's
That's awful.
Kids. Like, I don't understand how they made the frames so heavy. You know what I mean? Like, you pick the bikes up and you look at it and you go, oh, well, they didn't make the frames out of tubing. They made it out of a solid steel. And so, like it blows my mind that there's not like these nice, light, like sweet little, bikes for kids to ride. And, ideally someone, I a lot of my, friend, customer buddies, these guys are, at the, have they're middle-aged guys, they've got kids. And, if someone had like 2 or 3 kids, it'd be great because they could get this awesome bike that's built up and they could pass it down, for a few generations, not generations,
Right.
a few kids.
A few kids, yeah.
Worth
Yeah.
it so the kid has something good to ride,
Right.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
And I would have to imagine that just like a kid's trailer is going to hold its value. I mean, I've owned a trailer bike that I sold to one of our buddies in the group for like a few dollars less than what I bought it for, and that same thing with a child's trailer. And I think you're right that is definitely the discerning customer that really needs to know whether or not they want it. But I think you're right, and not only that, I think to your point about the quality, it's you definitely get a much well thought out mousetrap versus a lot of the big box stores, and and not only that, they just don't last. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a couple of hand-me-downs from people that have, just you're like, is my kid even gonna make it around the block with this thing? I mean, it's like, good Lord.
Dude, I have spent so much money and effort in bikes for my kids, where like all you can really do is go out there and get a quality frame. Like the specialized frames are all right. I mean, they're nothing compared to like what Joe's stuff is, but the crap that they put on kids' bikes is just a nightmare. Like if you just go get your kid's bike out of the garage and take the time in order to pull the handlebar out of it and hold it in one hand with like the handlebar out of one of your mountain bikes or something like that, you're like, oh my God.
Right.
Like it's just insane, like how crappy those components are.
Well, it's unbelievable that it can be, it's 2 to 3 times the weight, and yet it's still not very strong. I mean, because you can take some of their handlebars or wheels especially, and, they bend, twist, tweak, they just get destroyed, and yet you're talking about something that's, double the weight of what your normal mountain bike handlebar is, and it's like, what is going on?
It really has to do with the quality of the materials, and that's
right.
Honestly, those lower quality materials, a lot of times are steel, and they give steel a bad name. Like one of the biggest things that I have to overcome with customers is, oh, you build steel bikes, is it going to be heavy? And it's like, no, it's not going to be heavy, But their experience with steel bikes are these bikes that are made from low quality steel. They're way overbuilt. They're wicked heavy,
Right.
So they have this concept. They're like, oh, steel frames weigh, 6 pounds, 7 pounds. You look at, a bunch of the Surly bikes, which are nice steel frames, are still like 5.5, 6 pounds, whereas, a properly built, high end kind of handcrafted steel bike, you're talking, 3.5 pounds, 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds, but more in the striking distance of what some of the, really lightweight materials are. And so, yeah, they're using, that steel. You're exactly right. It's heavier and it's weaker. And so the end result is, from my perspective, the end result is I'm always having to explain to people here, come to my shop, put your hands on the materials I'm using. You'll get a sense of why it is that I can make a steel bike that isn't a tank,
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Now, Joe, you deal pretty much specifically with steel, or any plans to branch out from that?
My hope is to be doing titanium in the next couple of years.
Oh, nice.
We'll see if that happens. That's definitely, is a major jump in terms of equipment. And I've seen shops that have tried to continue to do steel and do titanium. And I think that it's a really big challenge because you start to get, cross contamination between tools. You're like, wait, is this my tie file or my steel file? I'd like to get to a point with the business where, I was successful enough that I could say, hey, I'm building bikes and I have the customer base that is ready for titanium.
Right.
So now, the bikes that I'm building, the customers that I'm attracting, like they're the right steel is the right material for them,
right.
And it's the right material for me as a builder at this stage. But certainly, I think that most builders kind of aspire to be working in titanium. Well, most TIG builders. If you're brazing, obviously you're doing steel, but I think if you're TIG welding, really the guys that are the kind of the top of their game, most of them are working in titanium.
Right.
I've done a little bit with stainless steel. And while it was a really good experience, I think that stainless sort of falls into this forgotten place. It's a really excellent material, and there certainly is a rider out there that stainless steel is a better material than titanium for. But I think that rider is is a small portion of the people out there, and stainless steel just doesn't sort of have the cachet of titanium. People think titanium is kind of like the best, kind of the best you can get. And stainless steel sort of gets forgotten, I think, in between the two, in between steel and tie.
Right.
Yeah. If you have you noticed? Speaking of tie, have you checked out what Oscar Blues has gotten into? Have you checked out Reeb bicycles?
Yeah. I really like the work that they do.
Yeah, there was they were down at the World Cup at Wyndham, and I had a chance to throw my leg over and ride one of those. It's I mean they're impressive. I mean, like you said, the caveat with titanium is you're definitely ponying up. You know what I mean? Period. So not even just so much from the from the back end side of things with the tools and the materials, but I mean the cost is what it is. But I'll tell you what, I mean a titanium bike it rides unbelievable. I mean, I remember, a couple of my buddies had light speed road bikes, and I'd never ridden a titanium road bike, and what a mistake that was, because you're like, whoa, this is like, this is amazing. So,
I'll dial that back just a little bit. I think that a lot of the whole like magic of tie bikes that people talk about is really like the magic of a thin wall custom made bike. And a lot of that magic ride feel comes from having a geometry that is perfect for you and having a like thin wall made with love kind of bike, not a like factory produced, mass production kind of bike. And, at the end of the day, like, in my world, in my opinion, right, which, is my opinion, like the feel of a handmade tie bike and a handmade chromoly bike is going to be a little bit different, but they're going to be way closer together than they are to any, mass production bike. And the tie bike, will be a half a pound or 3/4 of a pound lighter than that chromoly bike. But at the end of the day, the handmade thin-walled, high-quality materials bike is going to feel that. And, whether it's tie or chromoly, especially in the fat bike world that, like a lot of the conversation we've been talking about today, like a lot of that is going to be lost in the feel of, of those big tires. So, like, I love tie, and I wouldn't be down on tie at all. But in the kind of conversation that we're having right now, really what tie gets you is a half a pound in weight. And if you're putting the same build on the bike, I mean, we're talking about turning a 24-pound bike into a 23.5-pound bike, or a 19-pound bike into an 18.5-pound bike. And, there's a lot of cost that goes into making that bike tie. So, like maybe I'm like kind of an old retro grouch. And I would love, like, I'm all on for tie, but man, like I'm nowhere near ready to like turn my nose up at chromoly, man. Like there's a lot of just beautiful chromoly out there. And frankly, if the bike is handmade, it's art. And if it's art, it's painted. So even if it's tie, I want to paint it. I want it to be some crazy color. So at the end of the day, the only dude who's going to know it's tie is me. And the only difference that I'm going to feel is a little bit of weight. So for that, I'll put the $1,000 or $2,000 or $4,000 in my pocket. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm living the steel, man. I love it.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way almost. I mean, if because I wouldn't say if I could afford a titanium bike, I would probably get one. But yeah, my road bike is a steel bike, and it's lasted 10 years. And it's still going strong. I can keep up with most other people on group rides. So it gets the job done. And so it's a great material, and it feels good. I mean, I don't know if it's a lively feel or, but I just know that when I ride it, and this was coming off of Cannondale before with the, the fat aluminum kind of dead feel to it. The steel bike was just tons better as far as ride quality goes, and comparable weight. Like you said, maybe a pound or two lighter, but nothing that. I mean, you think, oh, a pound or two, but in frame weight, I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, it's not. They say rotating weight, wheels and stuff. That's where you feel it more. So, I kind of subscribe to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, good job.
I guess I would just pile on with what Dave was saying. Certainly while I'm really excited to build titanium at some point, I think that steel is amazing. And if you look at for your dollars spent, what you're getting, you're getting a lot more. In terms of like getting a handcrafted steel bike, because titanium just has that huge upcharge. If I'm only got so much money to spend, I'm certainly going to be very happy with a steel bike. The only people talk about, titanium has, it lasts forever. There's no corrosion. When was the last time you really saw a steel bike that was rusted out? Like if you're caring for your steel bike and you're, touching up your paint if you need to, and you're doing a frame saver treatment inside, like that bike is going to last just as long as the titanium frame, assuming it's properly built. And like Dave said, like, when Cannondale, Trek, Giant, Specialized make a bike, they have to make a bike for a 300-pound dude to get on it. Like when a custom builder makes you a bike, he's making the bike for you, and so he's going to tune the diameters and the wall thicknesses of those tubings for both your weight, your strength, and your riding style. Those are the things that I take into consideration. When I'm making some of those decisions. And when you're getting a mass-produced product, you're not getting that. You're getting something that is rated for 300 pounds, most likely. Most fit cyclists are not weighing in at 300 pounds. So yeah, absolutely, like Dave's saying, take that $1,000, probably honestly more than $1,000 that you save getting, the handmade steel frame versus the handmade titanium frame, put it into the wheels, and now you're taking care of rotating mass, as you're saying, Gadar, and you've got a better bike. You're going to have a bike that's going to ultimately be faster. So yeah, I mean, steel is excellent. Like I don't feel limited, in what I do with the material at all. And I really, there's some people that prefer steel to titanium because they say, like for example, if a really big, really strong rider came to me, when I was talking about stainless steel having a good place, steel and stainless steel are better for that big, strong rider, because odds are that titanium is going to feel noodly to that guy. That really good, kind of supple feeling of titanium, that vibration dampening of titanium. That big rider, a big 225-pound guy that's a masher that's riding a single speed, he's going to turn that thing into a noodle. But like a really nice stainless steel bike, like a Reynolds 953, super strong air hardening stainless steel, that's something that is going to provide him the kind of stiffness he needs.
Nice. Now, do you pick certain tube sets, like you just mentioned, Reynolds 953? Do you pick certain tube sets for certain riders? Like, I mean, even going different brands, Columbus, Reynolds, True Temper, or whatever.
Yeah, I do mix it up a little bit. I certainly use a lot of True Temper, and they have a huge variety of tubing. But I'll use Reynolds from time to time if there's a certain size or dimension of the tubing I'm looking for that I can't get. I have used Columbus, I've used Didaki, I've used Nova, and also, a lot of times I'll make stuff myself. I'll get 4130 and I'll shape it and form it into exactly what I need.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of variation that goes in. It's totally dictated by what is the person going to use it for, how much do they weigh, how strong are they, and there's kind of, certainly there starts to become, common things that I like to use certain tubes. I'm like, yeah, this tube is really excellent for this application. I do a lot of this, but I would say almost every bike is there's something usually that's a little bit different in it.
Right.
Nice. Well, fantastic. It's about almost 15 after the hour, and you can see how this could go on and on and on. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to check in with both Gunnar and myself. Folks, if you are just watching this on replay, you are watching Bike Chat 101, Thursday evenings, 9:01 Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I believe, in Rochester, Minnesota. But Dave, thanks for joining. I also want to thank Red Flag Dan and a good number of folks that tuned in. Folks, be sure to give Graham Cycles a follow. They can be found on Instagram. They are also, I believe, is it Flickr? Is it Flickr?
Yeah, I really so I do the Instagram. I need to do it more. But I try to put a lot of stuff up on Flickr, and as well as on the Facebook. I do some stuff on Facebook. Yeah, but definitely Flickr, if you guys want to see behind the scenes kind of stuff, if you like to look at pictures of kind of like weld porn, Flickr is really where I put a lot of that up, and then obviously on my website, there's a pretty extensive owners gallery. And then Instagram, Instagram is I have fun with the Instagram. So you're going to see stuff from Graham Cycles, but you're going to see, pictures of my dog rolling around in the yard and stuff as well.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Like I said, let's be courteous to everybody's time. Like I said, you guys probably got other things you're getting yourselves into. But again, it's grahamcycles.com. Again, Joe Graham, and he is available to take care of all your custom cycling needs, whether it is a Chubby Pony cargo bike, cyclocross bike, dirt jumper, fat bike, or pretty much you dream it, you build it, I guess. Is that safe to say?
You dream it, I build it.
Got it, not me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You dream it, you build it yourself, And
Yeah.
Seriously. And you charge them for it too, right?
Exactly. And then just send me the money. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, before we sign off, does anybody have anything in closing they want to add? Gunnar, how about yourself, my friend?
Just come back on Tuesday nights for the craft beer blab, and we'll be talking craft beer if you're into that. And other than that, it's all good.
Excellent. All right, I'm gonna hit the.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate being invited. I hope to be back soon.
All right, absolutely.
Yeah.